In the neon-soaked streets of Blackpool, known globally for its vibrant illuminations and seaside charm, a different kind of electricity runs through the shadows, a current powered by illicit trade and unspoken rules. On the early morning of April 10, 2023, that current surged violently at a residence on Tarnbrook Drive. For Daniel Cunningham, a man deeply entrenched in the local distribution of controlled substances, the nightmare began not with a siren, but with the heavy, rhythmic thud of footsteps ascending his stairs. He was jolted from sleep, only to find his sanctuary breached by 3 masked figures. They didn't come to talk. They came wielding hammers, using the sheer weight of their presence to demand his inventory and his cash. Caught in a moment of absolute vulnerability, Cunningham made the calculated choice to surrender. He handed over the product without a physical struggle, prioritizing survival over pride, at least in that terrifying moment. The intruders, having secured their prize, vanished into the pre-dawn mist, leaving Cunningham and his partner shaken but physically unharmed. Naturally, the partner did what any civilian would do. She contacted the authorities. But when law enforcement arrived, expecting to take a statement from a victim, they were met with a frustratingly familiar obstacle. Cunningham refused to speak. He offered no descriptions, no names, and no direction for the investigation. To the officers, it looked like fear. To those who know the streets, it was adherence to a strict code: you do not cooperate with the law. However, Cunningham's silence wasn't born of passivity. It was a strategic pause. During the chaos of the invasion, the mask of anonymity had slipped just enough for him to recognize one of the perpetrators, John Hutchinson. Hutchinson was a smaller player in the Blackpool scene, a man whose ambition had recently begun to outweigh his caution. By robbing Cunningham, Hutchinson hadn't just stolen product. He had challenged a hierarchy. And in this underworld, a challenge left unanswered is a fatal sign of weakness. Rather than trusting the justice system to handle the break-in, Cunningham picked up the phone. He didn't dial 999. He dialed a number with an area code from Merseyside. On the other end of the line was Lee Clark, the lifeline of Cunningham's operation, and a man whose reputation in Liverpool was built on resolving problems with extreme prejudice. Clark wasn't just a supplier of Class A substances. He was an enforcer who understood that in their line of work, reputation is the only currency that matters. As Cunningham relayed the events of the morning and dropped John Hutchinson's name, the gears of a severe retribution plot began to turn. The police had left the scene with nothing, unaware that a private, far more dangerous investigation had already been launched that would not end in a courtroom, but on the streets. The wheels of retribution were now spinning, fueled by a dangerous alliance between Blackpool's local desperation and Liverpool's organised muscle. In Merseyside, Lee Clark wasted no time. He enlisted the assistance of David Bond, a figure whose name carried significant weight in the darker circles of the city. To them, this wasn't an emotional vendetta. It was a matter of professional enforcement. On the afternoon of April 10th, the pair climbed into a grey Ford Fiesta vehicle registered to Clark's partner, a mundane detail that would later become a critical piece of evidence. They tore across the motorway, heading north toward the coast, intent on delivering a message that would resonate through the underworld. While the Scouse enforcement team was en route, Daniel Cunningham activated his local assets. For the meager sum of $200, he recruited Darren McCabe to act as his eyes on the ground. McCabe was a man living on the fringes, known to struggle with dependency, and often found lurking in the shadows of the local drug scene. He was a loyal customer of Cunningham's, making him a useful, if volatile, tool. But McCabe lacked the calculated discipline of the Liverpool duo. His erratic behavior was already drawing attention. Earlier that day, a landlady at a local pub overheard him muttering in a state of manic panic, expressing a desperate need to find a specific individual and end the problem to secure his payment. McCabe's hunt was aggressive and undisciplined. He stormed over to John Hutchinson's last known address, only to find the target absent. Instead, he was met by Hutchinson's partner. In a calculated move designed to instill pure terror, McCabe produced a sharp weapon, brandishing it with menacing intent. He delivered a chilling ultimatum that would haunt the investigation. The Scousers are coming for Hutchie. His time is up. The message was clear: this wasn't just a local dispute anymore. Heavy hitters were involved. Terrified, The woman immediately contacted Hutchinson, relaying the severity of the threat. Panic set in. Hutchinson, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to vanish. He fled to a friend's flat on Scorton Avenue, believing that a change of location would be enough to weather the storm. He assumed he could lay low until the heat died down. But he had underestimated the reach of Cunningham's network. McCabe, driven by the promise of cash and the pressure of his own demons, was relentless. He scoured the streets, eventually tracking Hutchinson to his hiding spot. The target was acquired. The hunters in the Ford Fiesta were notified. The trap was set, and for John Hutchinson, the window for escape had firmly closed. As the sun began to dip on April 10th, casting long shadows over Scorton Avenue, the grey Ford Fiesta arrived at its final destination. It was just past 6:00 p.m. time when most residents were settling in for the evening. But for the three men inside the vehicle, the day's work was only just beginning. Darren McCabe remained behind the wheel, his role shifting to that of the getaway driver, while Lee Clark and David Bond stepped out onto the pavement. They moved with a chilling sense of purpose, carrying items that would soon transform a quiet residential flat into a crime scene. The entry was not subtle. With a resounding crash, the glass of the front door was shattered, instantly announcing their arrival to anyone inside. In the living room, John Hutchinson and a friend were caught completely off guard. There was no time to flee, no time to negotiate. David Bond, taking the lead, initiated a severe physical confrontation almost immediately. The objective was twofold: punishment and recovery. Hutchinson became the sole focus of the assault, enduring a sustained and intense attack, while his friend watched, helpless to intervene. Under extreme duress and facing overwhelming force, Hutchinson revealed what the intruders had come for: the location of the stash. The inventory, later estimated to be worth tens of thousands of pounds, was quickly secured. Their mission accomplished, the trio exited as rapidly as they had arrived, leaving Hutchinson slumped on the sofa, conscious but clearly in distress. Neighbors, alarmed by the commotion and the shattered glass, had already contacted the authorities. Police officers arrived shortly after 7:00 p.m., expecting to investigate a burglary or a disturbance. What they found was a man who, despite visible signs of a struggle, remained steadfast in his silence. Hutchinson refused to identify his attackers, and, more critically, declined urgent medical attention. He was still playing by the rules of the street, unaware that the game was already over. The officers left, frustrated by the lack of cooperation, completely unaware of the silent catastrophe unfolding within Hutchinson's body. While he appeared stable enough to dismiss the police, he was suffering from catastrophic internal complications. The force of the earlier assault had caused unseen damagia, ruptured spleen, and severe trauma that was slowly shutting down his system. At 9:10 p.m., emergency services were summoned to the address once again. This time, the situation was dire. Hutchinson had gone into cardiac arrest. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, fighting to reverse the damage, but the internal injuries proved too extensive. Shortly after arrival, John Hutchinson passed away, turning a case of robbery and assault into a major investigation into a fatal tragedy. Unaware that they had just crossed a line from which there is no return, Daniel Cunningham and his accomplices had already dispersed, believing their mission was a resounding success. The stolen inventory was recovered, the message had been delivered, and in their minds, order had been restored to the hierarchy. Later that evening, the group's digital communication painted a disturbing picture of their mindset. In a group chat, the mood was celebratory, filled with adrenaline and banter. David Bond messaged about a physical injury he had sustained during the encounter, complaining that his foot was in agony. Lee Clark responded with a chilling nostalgia, remarking that the night's events reminded him of the good old days. Cunningham, the architect of the scheme, simply expressed his gratitude. "Thanks, brother. Tell the other fella I appreciate it." But the digital celebration was cut short when the reality of John Hutchinson's condition began to circulate through the community. The tone of the messages shifted instantly from bravado to self-preservation. When news broke that Hutchinson had lost his life, panic set in. David Bond, suddenly gripped by the fear of consequences, messaged Clark, asking a desperate question: What if irresponsible? Clark, attempting to reassure him, dismissed the possibility, claiming that a single strike to the back with a blunt object couldn't possibly lead to such a tragic outcome. In a cruel twist of irony, the post-mortem examination would later confirm that the specific injury Bond feared caused by the very tool he wielded was indeed the primary factor in the victim's fatal, internal trauma. The authorities, now treating the case as a major inquiry into an unlawful killing, moved with precision. They pieced together a mountain of digital evidence, including the group's own messages, cell tower data, and surveillance footage of the grey Ford Fiesta. On April 11th, police executed a coordinated operation. Daniel Cunningham was apprehended at his home, caught mid-conversation on the phone with Lee Clark. As the net tightened, the other members of the conspiracy were systematically located and detained. The loyalty they had sworn to uphold crumbled under the pressure of interrogation. Clark attempted to confuse the narrative with vague descriptions, while McCabe pointed the finger at Bond, claiming he hadn't seen the weapon until it was too late. Reactions when it arrived was absolute. The courtroom at Preston Crown Court became the final stage for this tragedy. Lee Clark and David Bond, identified as the primary aggressors, were found guilty of the most serious charge, murder, and sentenced to life imprisonment, with minimum terms of 27 and 24 years respectively. Daniel Cunningham, the man who set the events in motion but did not deliver the fatal blow, was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 18 years. Darren McCabe, the scout who led the hunters to their prey, also received a manslaughter conviction, handing him a 16-year sentence. In the end, a dispute over stolen property and bruised egos resulted in one man losing his life and 4 others losing their freedom for decades. It was a brutal reminder that in the underworld, the price of reputation is often paid in years, and the pursuit of revenge rarely leaves anyone standing.